Hello and welcome to the shed. Today's video is part 2 in the cabinet door build. If you missed out on part 1, go back and check that out where we dimensioned all the timber ready for our joinery in this week's video. So that brings me into what we're doing this week, and that is preparing the joinery, plowing some grooves and cutting some plywood panels ready for a dry fit in next week's video. Hope you enjoy. So now that we've got the timber ready for this project, what I wanted to do was just bring you in so you get some idea of the layout here before we get started with the joinery. So if we have a look across here, you can see we're going to have mitred half-laps here. I'll show you a close-up of this joint in a second. I'm going to have a cross rail here that is going to have miters as well. That's going to sit in from the front. And then of course, the same as at the top, we're going to do down the bottom here. Now it's important to note that I have my reference faces facing down on these two side rails. On these front ones, because I have to reference the marking gauge in a different spot, I actually have the reference faces to the front. So on a close-up of this joint, you can see here that the jarrah is sitting a little bit proud just here. So if I just hold that there, we can see we've got this. So I'm going to be adding a chamfer to this part just here, and I'm hoping it'll add some sort of shadowy detail to it, and that's my aim with this. So I have a marking gauge here set to the depth of this one here on the Tasmanian oak. So that number is just half of this 19mm, and that's what we're going to be using around the whole thing. So half of 19mm. So you set one of these up, don't change it. Now the very first step of that is to obviously transfer the thickness of the Tasmanian oak pieces to the jarrah pieces, and then we can make sure that we're marking baseline corner to top corner of the piece of wood so we don't get any indiscrepancies. After we've done all the tongues, we can then transfer those tongues. If the mark gets a little bit off with our sawing, at least we'll be transferring the correct angle to the Tasmanian oak cross pieces to try and avoid any gaps in the joinery. Now the next step is to use the marking gauge on the back of our boards, mark that out so we can then remove that back piece. So we'll cut it like a normal half lap, so we move that out square and then we cut the tongue on the angle after doing that. If you turn it over, you've got to remember that I'm referencing from the other side. So you can see here, I've run this knife line all the way through, because as we cut the diagonal on this tongue afterwards, we're going to need that reference. On this side, I have gone all the way through as well. You don't have to, you can just nick just for the tongue there. That's really up to you, whether you visually want to see a line or not. So I'm just going to come in here, line that square up. My angle's going to go in this direction, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a straight edge, line it up on this bottom corner down here, line it up to the outside edge here. I'm going to quickly go ahead and mark these other ones. Now we've got it all marked, we need to start cutting this joinery out. So what I like to do when I first start these is do the shoulders first, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the shoulders first here. We bring the chisel in and deepen the knife line to start with. Create a little channel or notch. You can bring your knife back like this to tidy it up. I notch this corner as well because I prefer to do this. And then I'm going to proceed to saw down to this baseline. You want to use a back saw for this for first class cuts, and if you want to know about the 3 saw class cuts, do check out the video down below. one corner to corner. Corner to corner. Now that we've got these cheeks sawn off, we can go ahead and cut our angles on these pieces. Remember, double check that you've got them correct before you saw them. But since I've already laid them out, I know I've got them correct, but you should double check them just in case. You want to treat this as a first class cut as well, because it's going to be a visual cut. You can saw just off this one if you really want to, and then use the shooting board to shoot it back. So what I'll do is I'll show you that for this one. We'll saw just off it. So I'm about 2 or 3 millimeters off here, and we'll use the shooting board after we've cut the other two and clean this up. 45-degree attachment added to the shooting board. We'll come in and shoot this until we hit the corner. So we're looking to hit the corner right up here on the very tip. Moving on, we obviously need to transfer, as we've done here, this shape to over here, so onto these cross stretches. So how do I go about doing that? Well, it's very simple. I literally just bring this stretcher in and I'll line it up on here, make sure it's pushed up tight against the shoulder on the inside here, nice and flush on the edge here, and then with my marking knife I score a line on the surface. Just like this one here that was in that demo I showed you, I've gone ahead and marked this, and obviously the other board. So now we've got to use our marking gauge. So I'm going to use the same marking gauge that I had before with the same setting. And I believe I mentioned before that I was going to mark it from the front to do this, but that is not actually 100% accurate. I want to go off the back face of all of these, as then it's actually going to match what we did on the other boards and it's going to be more accurate. So I'm going to come off that back face. Now, I know I've showed reference faces and edges on this, but these boards are actually squared all around because it just makes it easier if I do change my mind when I'm making a project. I prefer to have everything just squared and ready to go. So there's a little tip. Do make them parallel, square and all of that, because then if you do change your mind, and although you're meant to come off your reference face and edge, I know the rest of them already are reference faces and edges, so it does give a little more flexibility when you're doing your project. So it's just something to bear in mind. So across the top grain, then down the long grain. So now we're going to do the same on this piece. We only need to do this short line here because our reference on the top edge is the corner of the board. Just like we did before. I'm coming flat across the whole thing to start establishing a curve. Then all my sawing is concentrated up on this top corner first. Now that one should be done, and we can go ahead and cut this bit out. Before we do that in this project, we're going to cut all of them. It's just best to work in this process, cut all of the same joint at the same time, while you're tuned in mentally, getting used to it, and then you're just going to be more accurate doing it in a series, and it's going to make you more efficient. So I'm referencing along this edge here on the top and down here. But I'm concentrating more on the top than down this edge here. side. So you can see that's starting to wobble now, which means I probably need to go just slightly deeper on the shoulder and that should come out. As we did before, I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest first. So now that we've cleaned these up, I need to make sure that they're going to fit properly and as intended. So what we're going to do is loosely put them together, we're going to clamp them, so we're essentially doing a dry fit here, just to ensure that whether we need to do any work on the flat parts of the tongue here on the uprights, or whether we need to flatten any more on our cross pieces. So it's just a good little test to see how tight they come together, although if there are a few little gaps, you can just fill them in at the end. But it's still a good step to take at this stage. So if we look at this, it's not square, it's actually warping out. Now, this one looks pretty flat and square to me, up on this edge. This one's looking pretty good. This one looks like it's a little bit out to me. The angles are all wrong on this one, and I think it's pulling the entire thing out of square. So we need to look at this one here. As for the rest of them, they seem to be sitting fairly flat and square. This one, if we look down on this corner just here, is a little bit proud here, which means we probably need to take a little bit more material off. So I think for the most part, the two on our left side, or your right side, this stretcher, I think they're okay to start with. So we're going to look at the tongues on this stretcher first, and then we'll see how different it is after we put it back together. So I'm just going to remove these two clamps here. I'll remove just this upright, and we'll have a look at how accurate we were with that. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this is to use a router plane, because you know you're going to get it square right across, and so that's what we're going to do here, because it's vital that we get this nice and tight and clean and square. So what we want to do is pivot it here. I've got it locked down nice and tight on the bench here. I've raised it up a little bit because it's just a little easier to work with. Now, what you want to do is drop your router plane blade down until it hits the highest point. And that's where we back it off just a touch and then lock it in place. Now I'm going to have this support leg down here just to give me a little more support as I come further away from the shoulder, and we're going to pivot it off the shoulder like this. And then we're just turning the knob on the top of the router plane a quarter of a turn at a time, and we'll keep going until we evenly hit it across the whole thing, and then we'll know that it's all level and square. So I just did a quick clamp up there again, as you saw me doing, and I just need to double check all of these joints because something is still not right with these. It's not coming together the best, so I've got to just double check every one of these joints. So I'm going to go to the other jar upright first, then we'll check the Tasmanian yoke. I'd say for now we've got these joints done, they've all been checked, they're all the right depth. So now we've got to find the center of these stretchers. So off camera I've gone ahead and prepared this cross piece. You can see instead of just a single mitre, I've got this double mitre. Now these are not 45 degrees because of how wide this piece is. So I had to manually lay the ruler on top, just like we did with the corners, just to ensure we get it nice and accurate. I've also gone ahead here and laid out the center of this board so I know exactly where it's going to go, because unlike the other mitres, the Tasmanian oak is actually going to sit on top of this. So once I had that laid out, I did the same on the other side as well. And so all I have to do now is line it up, and then we're going to get a knife in here. And I have to mark the rebate that's going to happen here with these pieces. And I'm going to run the knife back and forth here a number of times because I want this to be a nice deep reference line here. Same on this side. Now in this case I don't really need to deepen that knife line with the chisel, because I did a nice deep chisel or knife line in the first place, so I can actually just come back against it here. And then back to my first one, that's what I'm going to saw first. So I'm following my straight line on my side, and I'm just going to depth on this side. So now I've cut them down, I'm going to come through the middle here and just break this up a little bit to make it a little easier to remove. And just pop this edge here. Now there's a nice flat area here on that knife line, so I can bring my chisel in nice and flat here to reference the back edge where the router plane's not going to work as effectively. This is the one that's going to be sitting in here. It looks like it's going to come in pretty cleanly. We're going to jump onto the other rail, get that done, and then look at ploughing some grooves for our captive panel. So I have my Stanley number 45 set up with a 7mm blade in it. What I'm going to do for all of this is just run it off the back panel because they're all in alignment for the outside, and then with this central rail, all I'm going to do is then just offset it the distance of the back here, which I can just straight measure, and I can just move the fence across. Before I disassemble it, I'm going to come in with a pencil and I'm just going to put a G. So I know where my grooves are going. That way when I take it apart I know exactly where they're going. And I'm also going to mark a B on the back of all these pieces to ensure that I reference them every time when I do my groove with the plow plane. I'm going to set my fence 5mm in from the back, so 5 plus 7 should end up where we want it. So I'm leaving a 1mm leeway there, so 5mm is what it is, and we're going to plow the groove maybe 10mm deep, I think. 5 to 10 is usually what I go with. What I need to bear in mind is that I don't want to go too far into this part of the tongue here, only far enough that my groove panel is going to run into the side piece. So I'm going to set myself 10mm from that corner to here. And that means I won't take the groove past this point here. Same down the other end. And I may just need to chisel right down on these far edges. I'm not 100% sure how well I'm going to be able to stop it with the plow, but I probably won't be able to go to the full depth here, so I'll either cut the corner off the groove the panel when I put it into the groove if I haven't gone far enough, or I will chisel that anyway, so hopefully it's deep enough for it to all come together nicely. So with these plow planes you normally start at the far end, so I'm just going to push it in against where it's going to come together. And I'm stopping at that line that I had back here. Now with these, I like to wax the skate, because sometimes that gets a little trapped, and although this is a rosewood fence, I like to wax that as well. I don't want it to come any further than this. What I need to do is come in here with a chisel and make sure it's locked down nice and tight so it doesn't move, and I need to chisel down to depth here. That's where a small chisel like this that fits any groove is very useful. You can even bring it back in this way. Considering what I'm working with here, I'm not so sure that I'm actually going to go down to that full 10mm depth. This depth is enough to hold it currently. So I need to go ahead and repeat that at the other side. Now I haven't quite gone to depth here because I do have that in the way, so I am just going to and just use my chisel to take a few bits. Oh no, I just chipped the entire edge off here. So using my chisel there, I just chipped this piece off, but luckily that is actually hidden by the rest of the panel, and it's still square on this edge, so it won't be seen once it comes together. It's not ideal, but it is kind of inevitable. Now I do have the piece that's split off. If I had some super glue, I'd use that. I currently don't have any super glue, so I'm just going to use some normal wood glue and just tape it on. So you do get these little repairs that come up. They're not ideal. You don't really want them to happen, but you've just got to fix them up as they occur. Sit back and relax and watch me make a few more mistakes along the way. once again, I'll jump back down here and we'll have it all clamped together so we can have a look where the grooves sit to ensure that they all line up. So if we look here, we can see where the rebate comes in. We can see where the groove fits, and it fits nice and tight here. Let me just move you up. And we can see here that we actually have nice tight fitting grooves here. So let's get the plywood up here and we'll start sawing it out. I'm going to use this top edge as the top panel and then run down into the bottom panel. I like the idea of these rays coming down like this, and I think it's going to look good sort of cascading down the door. So we're going to go to 650 millimeters, lining it up here. I had a few comments on how I can try and stop the blowout on the back end, so what I'm going to try here is running some tape on the back of the cut as was suggested a few times, and we'll see how well that changes whether the saw blows out the back or not. In any case, I'm still cutting off the line here because I always cut off the line with plywood just to ensure that we can clean it back up. So that's where we're going to leave part 2 of the cabinet door build. We'll pick up in part 3 right where we left off and finish up the door, including finishing and all that good stuff. If you did like this video, please do like and subscribe down below. While you're down there, please do sound off in the comments. Even if it's just things that you think I could improve visually, sound-wise, anything like that, I would love to hear any of that feedback. And if you missed out on the part 1 video, do check out that video up here. And until next time, bye for now.